everyone, welcome back to Shogi Bite. I'm your host, Kumo. I appreciate you joining us today. Today I wanted just to go over a basic tutorial about Shogi for you, so you can kind of keep up with future videos and enjoy it as much as we do. So, what do I mean by basic? Well, I literally mean a basic tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be going over our Shogi Ban, or board for chess players. We'll be covering our hardware. In this case, we're talking about our piece stands. And we'll be going over our koma, also known as pieces. When we get to koma, we're going to break it down a little bit more and actually get into their specific movements and how they promote. So, without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so let's jump into this. Here in front of us we have our basic shogi setup, at least the hardware minus the koma, to kind of illustrate to you how this is going to break down. So right here is our Shogi Ban. Our Shogi Ban is important to note, and I hope it's not too hard to recognize on camera. So there are these little pips right here on these spots. These pips are intricately important to Shogi simply because they signify the promotion zone. When a piece, such as a pawn, crosses over this promotion zone, they are allowed to promote to their next stage, which we'll get into more when we go over the pieces themselves. So now we have these platters on the side. These platters are used for when you have a captured piece. Say our pawn is here in this scenario, and our opponent has silver on our head. They can just come in, take us, and it gets placed on their piece stand or in their hand to be dropped and used later on as one of their teammates. So the board itself breaks down in numbers of 1, 2, 3, 4 through 9, and 1, 2, 3, 4 through 9 on this side as well. However, if we're looking at Western books based on Shogi, we're going to be looking at A, B, C, D through I over here to stick with a more familiar notation such as found in chess. So now that we've gone over how the board is set up itself, well, not so much set up for gameplay, but set up in general, let's start going over our pieces. See you on the other side. So here I have two sets of koma set on both of our piece stands. These koma are of course not captured, we haven't even played the game, but they're just here to illustrate that they're the same pieces, just different notation, or shorthanded notation you could think of it. However, these two styles we see will be most frequently occurring in online games and just standard games around. So I wanted to illustrate these two. Our first piece we'll go over, seeing how he's the most important piece in the whole game, is the king. The king, just like in chess, can move in any of the 8 directions that surround him in one step. So, his movement in general is not too impressive, right? But once we get into castling later on, or you see castling in games, this movement becomes a very intricate part of gameplay. So, that's our king. The other version of the king is this one right here. That symbol means literally the same thing, it's just a different way of notating it. Some people prefer this style over the other style. So our next piece here is pretty simple in his standard unpromoted form. He's just the pawn or foot soldier, depending on which name you like to use. He can only move one space forward. This is a drastic difference from those of you used to chess, who are used to having the diagonals for attack instead of the forward motion for attacking. However, in Shogi, it is simply just that. He attacks forward. His promoted side looks like this, which we'll get into later. varying Koma looks like this. Promoted side, a very similar image. Our next piece is the Knight. Simply, he's the Knight. Even he looks like he has little horse legs here. So the Knight in this game moves similarly to how it does in chess, but loses the horizontal attack. What I mean by that is, the Knight is a very important part in the Shogi game. It's the only piece that can jump, and it does what we're used to in chess, where it goes up 2 spaces and over 1 for its attack. Its promoted side looks like this, and its varying calligraphy looks like this. Our third piece we're going to go over is the Lance. The Lance is pretty cool, one of my personal favorites for endgame. He's able to go straight as far as the board will let him. So in this situation, since he's dead center, it's only 4 spaces, but spaces double if he's way back here, etc. Just like the Rook and Bishop we'll get into later. His promoted side looks like this, and the alternating calligraphy looks like this. Our next piece to go over in Shogi is the Silver General. The Silver General, along with the other 3 we're about to go over, are very important for defense and in some cases offense. I want to take a little bit extra time and go a bit slower on Silver because I find a lot of people forget how Silver moves when they're actually in gameplay. Because based off of any kind of Western game, he does have very specific move patterns that you may or may not have seen. For the Silver General, he's allowed to go these 3 spaces front and these 2 to diagonals. This makes him very important for tight situations in game space, and it allows him to be very versatile in attacking and defending as well. So Silver, diagonals and forward. This is its calligraphy. And this is it in another style. Sorry if there's a drastic change in video. I forgot to charge my phone while I was recording last time, so I had to reset it up again. Anyway, our next piece is gold. Gold is another one of those pieces like Silver that's very important in the game of Shogi. He's wonderful for tight situations, late game attack, and defense. All around MVP here. The Gold General moves 3 to the front, 2 to the side, and 1 to the back. Slightly the opposite of what the Silver General did. How I explain most people about Gold is to think of him kind of as a horseshoe crab. Up here is kind of like his body, with his little stingray tail popping out here. He can move all these spaces for 1 move. This is what he looks like. This is the back side. Notice there's nothing there. We'll get to that later. And this is what gold looks like on different calligraphy. Our next piece is another one of those MVP pieces, arguably the second or first most powerful Koma in the entire game, based off who you're talking to. This Koma is, of course, the Bishop. The Bishop moves just like he does in Western chess. It can move in any space allotted to it, at any of the diagonals, as long as it's not colliding with another piece. Well, what I mean by that is they can't jump over pieces like the Knight can. So, as you can see, it's got a pretty broad range, which having pieces with this much land to cover in their attack is a very strong tool in Shogi. There's only this one and one other piece that have this many movements. Here's the front of this piece, backside, and the comb in a different calligraphy style. Our last piece we have to go over is the Rook. The Rook is the VIP MVP of the entire game. Most people argue it is the single most strong piece in the entirety of Shogi. The reasons for this is that because of its lateral movement and the nature of Shogi being such a push forward and aggressive style of gameplay, arguably, is that this range and movement combination is a very deadly weapon. In fact, the Rook is such an important factor to Shogi that entire openings for the game are decided based off of where the Rook moves when it's first moved, which will be a little bit more complex than what I'm aiming for this video, but just be aware there's a difference between the words static Rook and ranging Rook. The Rook's coma looks like this. The reverse side, like this. One of the most fanciest and cool looking ones in the entire game, in my opinion. And on different calligraphy,